Before we go into the pros and cons, my opinions on this update, let's kind of go over their power and briefly explain, because there's a lot going on, right, as you can see in the background. So the Singularity can shoot biopods. The biopods can either latch on objects, there'll be a greenish highlight, or they'll be red if they can't actually land on anything, so you'll just be shooting for no reason. And you can either use the biopod to look as a camera, or you can use the biopod, which you want to do, to search for a survivor and shoot little pods on them. And then this pod will latch on them, as you can see, and it'll cause something called slipstream. A slipstream survivor can be teleported to, so they have to have a pod on their back, and it can also spread and contaminate other survivors in the area. I don't know the radius, I don't know all the exact numbers, so I'll try to be as transparent as I can. But that's the consensus of the basics of his power. Anyway, so once a survivor slipstream, that's when you can start doing some cool shit. You can teleport to them and you gain something called overclock mode. Overclock mode, you get a buff in action specifically toward vaulting, kicking, so kicking gens or kicking down pallets. If a survivor tries to stun you, it breaks kind of like Spirit Fury and you slow down and the overclock ends. When it comes to aiming down their power, I don't know if you get slowed. I think it's slightly. I don't think it's that noticeable, but I would love to see testing in the future of what the actual numbers are, because being able to use your power in chase is what makes this killer shine. And I think a lot of people were worried about, you know, a possible skull merchant again, a 3-gen killer, a knight. You'd be happy to know, with the current state of EMPs, which we'll go into in a bit, because EMPs will be a huge counter for you as a killer, that I don't think that's the case with 3-genning. It's hard to set up a pod web and just count on them to be there throughout the entirety of the match. Like, I found that utilizing pod cameras, I'm gonna call them pod cameras for the sake of clarification, using pod cameras to navigate and like it's not very good. You often get cucked by EMP, where it's a waste of time. And if anyone knows DVD, you don't want to waste time, because wasting time in the game goes against you, because it's all about clearing objectives, keeping action up, and ending chases quicker so you can keep the pressure going throughout the entire game, right? So that being said, let's kind of go into how you should use their power from what I found to be what works. As you're chasing a survivor, your first thing to do is find some place to put a pod camera, switch the pod camera, find the survivor, shoot the survivor, and then follow up with a teleport. Once the survivor has a pod on them, then you have your power. That's your entire kit. If you don't have that pod on that survivor, you are a M1 killer. You're pretty much useless. EMPs are gonna run you to the ground. It's not worth it, okay? It's a highly micromanaging killer, which is great, meaning the skill ceiling super high. I look forward to all the neat tricks that I'll be learning throughout this journey if I continue playing this killer, which I hope I do. I hope they don't change him too much. So as you can tell, your goal is to get overclock and chase. You can't get overclock if you can't teleport. All right, so that's why the whole trap thing won't work, because, and we're going to go into EMPs real quickly, and I'll hopefully show on the screen what it looks like, because I also misunderstood how the EMPs would function. This chapter totally took me by surprise. Let's going to talk about EMPs. So EMPs work where they're boxes scattered around the map. They regen over time, meaning that, so a survivor will take an EMP out of the box, and the box will slowly regenerate or print, 3D print. Think of clicking start on a project on your PC and you walk away and it's rendering. It's like that. And it's passive. Survivors can go up to the box and make it go faster by opening it, but it takes much longer, so it's not even worth it. It's a waste of time. So that being said, EMPs are an abundant supply because they're just passive. Think of a chest that's already open and you can grab the item out of it. That's how grabbing an EMP works, okay? With that being said, because they're an abundant supply, survivors will tend to use them to disrupt the pods that are on the structures. And when the pods are disrupted on the structures, you cannot use them at all for teleporting, and you also will have issues with shooting the little pod on the survivor. So you're not, like, you can't do anything. It completely counters you. A little extra thing to note, EMPs are AoE, meaning that they can affect not just you, but they can also affect other survivors or other pods in the vicinity. So as you're probably already now maybe understanding, that if you have a bunch of pods in a web with an abundance of EMPs, you will not get the web that you want to keep down a 3-gen. It's probably I think it's the easiest thing to counter is grabbing EMPs and blocking a 3-gen. It's anybody can do it. So what's really fascinating about the Singularity is the chase potential that's going to happen the longer more people have a chance to explore what this killer is capable of. I think just being able to teleport to the survivor using Slipstream is just the tip of the iceberg of possibilities. So for instance, you shoot the survivor to get the biopod on them, okay? And then they break line of sight. You could either you can try to regain line of sight, you know, to immediately teleport, which is the better option if you can. However, you can also, and this is where I'm wondering what's going to happen once this releases, you can use other structures to put a camera biopod up and then teleport using that. So you have 2 ways to teleport in chase, and that's going to be, I think mastering that is going to be where we see really good Singularity shine. What kind of angles will these players find out that are the best capable things? Well, not only that, what kind of how are the survivors going to react? Because if they see a biopod get placed somewhere while in chase, there was this player, and I'm gonna talk about it. They were really cute, actually. Shout out to them. They recognized me in PTB. Meanwhile, I'm streaming in Discord, and I was just like in awe over them playing like, I say like a bot, but it's not an insult. If anyone is aware, the bots in PTB are the most disgusting, like, sweaty players you've ever fucking anticipated, okay? Like, this guy was tracking my biopod as I was in chase and hiding around objects till I couldn't lock onto them, and I had to manually go find them. Like, it's made me think, once people know how to do that in a manner, like, what am I gonna have to do to adapt, to change my playstyle, to make it so I can still utilize my slipstream in chase? And that's why I'm not too sure when it comes to the EMP thing. It's hard to tell in PTB what's the full potential, right? Because the enemy players don't know. All they know is the basics of DBD, which is the looping aspect, but they don't know fully how to counter Singularity's power. So I'm curious because I don't know the full strength of EMPs either. With that being said, I did notice a counter to all of this was people would save the EMP for when they get a pod on them to prevent a teleport at some point, like, later. Now, my main concern is how good will players get where they know which pod is going to be used for teleporting and shooting. Like, I feel like eventually you'll have to be very, very specific of maybe shooting 2 different pods in an area and maybe using both of them to get on a survivor if they're aware of one of them. I don't know. So let's kind of go over the pros and cons of the Singularity, or at least maybe explain why this killer is so difficult to play. With that being said, one thing that I noticed while playing is that when you do the slipstream effect to get a survivor able to be teleported to, you might notice in some of these clips that a lot of the times when I'm trying to teleport to a survivor, I'm just shooting pods randomly along their trail. Like, and that's not because I want to. It's because you need to track the survivor pretty well and have some sort of aiming, meaning that to the person that commented on my TikTok saying, I hope it's a controller, a killer that can be played on controller really well. I don't know, dude. Aiming on controller for me is really hard. So if you are good at first-person shooters and you're good at aiming, I don't think you'll have much issue, but you need to be good at aiming because you have a minimal window. Take note, these pods are not automatic. They don't just automatically lock on people like passively, night or whatever. You have to actually do the work, and that's what makes this killer so hard. Another note thing I noticed, and you might also observe while watching, is some objects you can't put a pod on, and I don't like that. I feel like that in particular should be changed. Then again, I don't know if that would be too strong, but there are a lot of objects where you think that you could put a pod on them because, for camera's sake, and then you're just shooting randomly at nothing. Because as you can tell on this map in particular, you can shoot at the trees, but you can't shoot at this another height of like a 2-story building, or it'll turn green and then it'll turn back to red, and then there have been times where I've tried shooting a pod in chase, expecting it to hit the wall, and then I teleport instinctively and I end up in a different pod. Which leads me to my next, not problem, but something you need to be aware of. Pods being around the map are really easily to accidentally teleport to. And this is just, I don't think this should be changed really, because it's like being accurate with lockers with dredge, you know, like you're gonna miss teleport. It just gets kind of frustrating. You might notice I'll do cleanup, where I'll just clean up random pods to help with this accidental teleport. You don't have to do this. I just don't like ending up someplace where I didn't want to be. Another thing I didn't like is, and this might just be by design, that you don't know which pods are EMP'd. Unless I see the pod with electric or some type of status effect around it, I don't know if that pod is EMP'd. So let's kind of talk about the new map and my feelings on it, because it is part of the update and it does affect Singularity. I don't like the map. I think it's beautiful, but I think it's way too cluttered. I think it would be really great for, as I was saying on stream, save the map, beautiful map energy for the co-op game that's coming soon possibly, or the single player game that was leaked during anniversary. Save it for that, because while it's beautiful and very well made artistically, it feels awful to play on, especially on this killer. You excel with open maps. Like I think this map actually that you see, I'll have it playing here, Campbell's, any place with tall trees. Trees are great. Getting an overhead view with a pod, shoot, and then follow up is amazing. It feels so good. So like any other killer, they are map dependent a bit. You're definitely going to struggle on indoor maps. Breaking line of sight is not your friend. It is your enemy, along with EMPs. I think once survivors are aware that the camera pods need to be avoided at all costs to prevent the pod backpack, that's when we're going to have to see some issues with this killer's strength, which is expected. But so far, I have not really heard good reception on the map, aside from how pretty it is, okay? But we're not talking about how beautiful it is, okay? It's too big. Not only that, but you can't put a camera pod at the very top floor. The top floor gen, I think, is a terrible spot for a location. I think it's one of the worst, like, it's going to be the #1 gen you're just not going to bother with whenever you play this map. You're just going to act like it doesn't exist. It's very safe for the survivor, and it's very hard to counter with as killer. Because especially one thing I noticed when I was playing the Singularity on the new map, just to add, is that I would shoot a pod at a location thinking that I could see, but then there was foliage that would break line of sight, and I have to just scrap the pod completely and go somewhere else or just chase like normal. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the pros, unless I just suddenly think of some cons as I'm talking, because I'm not writing a script. It just saves time, so hopefully you enjoy my ranting a bit. But pros, timing overclock. Overclock, when timed correctly, can work really well in your favor, or timing the teleport as well. There's some cool maneuvers that you can do to help you end chase quicker with that kind of passive in mind. For instance, if you are timing the overclock as a survivor is vaulting a pallet, and as they are throwing the pallet down on the other side, so they're partially on the other side. It's very movement specific. The pallet will break, and you don't have to waste time breaking it. You can continue on and just be slightly slower. The other pro is that you can vault quicker to end chases quicker at loops like Killer Shack. You can even wait for the survivor to be slightly further away from the window, which, by the way, survivors, if you're watching, you need to break line of sight to prevent that teleport from happening. You don't have to give the Singularity that teleport for free, meaning that when you vault over a window, turn directly right, like don't go straight and don't continue. Like, think of like Huntress, okay? When you're vaulting through a window, you're not going straight to have a hatchet thrown at your ass, okay? You hug the sides to break line of sight. Same idea. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that when you're doing the double back kind of mind gaming thing at a short loop to get them to lose distance and run back into you so you can catch up and then melee them without breaking the pallet, you can do that better with the teleport. As you're seeing the survivor double back, or their movement stop, you can teleport and they'll walk into your person, you appearing, which is huge. Like, not having to deal with that distance is everything you want in a chase. With that being said, good survivors will see you lift up your power to shoot or teleport, and they'll do some cheeky mind games with it. Sometimes they won't throw the pallet down. You'll lift it up and, you know, teleport, and you'll teleport for no reason, and you'll actually lose distance because you're trying to go for the pallet break, and they know you're trying to go for the pallet break. And how you can counter this a little bit and mind game them back is there are times that I learned that if you raise up the thing as if you're about to shoot, they'll hesitate and they won't throw the pallet down because they think you're going to teleport. Okay, so you can, and then you get the free hit anyway, you know? So there's some mind gaming, which I like. Another pro I want to mention, how pods work around hooks. I was kind of worried about being able to utilize my power when a survivor was forced to go for the save, but that charge up is very slow and not even worth dealing with. You're better off waiting for the save and then going back in the pod to use it as a means for your power. Otherwise, you're wasting time. Also worth noting too that I noticed, and I was kind of curious before, when you switch back to your body after being in a biopod that is either nearby a hook or you actually check other biopods while you're near the hook, you'll come back in a very slow state. It won't be as fast. It's kind of similar to if you get EMP'd while you're in a pod, looking at stuff. It's same idea. I like that. I like that engagement. I don't think people should be able to get free pod value because, you know, they're camping hook. Lastly, I kind of want to discuss the bugs that I noticed in PTB. That I didn't notice many. I thought maybe that it would be worse because you are doing a lot of teleporting, you are doing a lot of different things, but Behavior did a pretty good job not having a super buggy PTB. However, there was a couple times, one that was more rare than the other, and I think has to do with elevation. So as you can see here, as I'm working on chasing this person, if I teleport on an elevation and trigger overclock and then the pallet breaks, it lifted me up into the ceiling and then I was stuck. I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. I had to quit the game after a 15-minute queue. It was awful. And then as you're seeing here, there's an issue with an actual mechanic for the Singularity and causes confusion for people who don't understand the power or the bug. I had to just keep playing because it's a 15-minute queue. It's the only playtime I got, right? So we're just going to ignore the buggy pallet for now. And I learned in a previous game is that pallet is, you can't interact with it because technically it was supposed to break when you teleported with overclock, okay? But it didn't break, so the game's not reading the pallet as fully there. It's in this weird state of the in-between, meaning if you really try to walk through it, you'll get all buggy and just mess. You can still walk through it. It's not a full object. If I try to break it, then what ends up happening, nothing. It just doesn't actually do anything. I'm just sitting there trying to break it. So if it does make it to live, it doesn't fully break the character because you can play, but if people aren't aware of it, they'll try to use the pallet and they'll die. So I don't think that's good, and I hope they fix it when it does release. So yeah, those are my thoughts. It's really cool to be able to have a killer as of recent that I'm looking forward to. The last two killers were not my thing. I think the last killer I was interested was Wesker. And as you can tell, I really enjoy killers with high mobility and good chase potential. That's just more my thing. But yeah, that's pretty much it, and I appreciate you for watching and staying this long while I rant about a killer I oddly enjoy. And if you would like to see more content, I highly recommend following my Twitch. Later.